Welcome, low ego action heroes and phoenixes, to episode 264. We're going to be talking about good and bad research questions. And because this keeps coming up over and over for people, what's a good research question? What's a bad research question? How do I ask better research questions? I decided that I was going to put together some slides for you, and we will have an audience participation adventure. Hello, Diana, where we are going to talk about good and bad research questions. Now, even though I'm showing slides, we are doing this live. And if you are joining us live from Twitch, YouTube, or LinkedIn, I want to hear what you think as I go through each slide. Ask me your questions, ask the tough and challenging questions, give examples. Let's really go there because I really want today to be a great educational and fun adventure. I also want to apologize for wearing too much makeup today, but I thought my camera filter wasn't going to work, so I tried to make myself up to look like my camera filter, and then the camera filter worked, and now I just look over made up, at least for me. Ana Lucia says, bad research questions, there's always the major faux pas. Would you use this? Well, I've got lots of slides ready to go, and we're going to go through all of them, and I'm going to be talking about good and bad research questions. So let me get to my slide notes. Let me find them. Okay, there we go. So there's my slide notes. Let's see if I can also see what you're saying. So welcome to good and bad research questions. I hope this is something you will refer back to and share. If you're watching this video later on YouTube, please leave some comments and questions there. And don't forget, I was just awarded a patent for a research recruiting related invention. So if your company is working on AI agents, or you have a favorite research tool like Dovetail, Ethnio, Lookback, etc., Rally, user testing, tell them about my invention. It's going to be up there on the top of the screen the whole time. You can find it at dcx.to/patent. That'll take you to a Miro board with more information and links to videos. And the password is colloquio, which is Italian for interview. COLLOQUIO, all lowercase. So, if you don't know me by now, I'm Debbie Levitt from Delta CX, hashtag open to work, and I've been a CX and UX strategist, researcher, designer, and all kinds of things for many years. My company's Delta CX. We do a lot of strategy and projects and coaching and training. We're doing a lot of coaching and training of teams right now, which is really fun. So if there's anything we can do, please let me know. And what else can I tell you? Join our free community. If you have not joined the community, why not? It's free. So go to dcx.to and that'll drop you on the links, and please join our Discord. We've got almost 500 people there, and it's pretty active and super friendly. And you will see a camera icon on the bottom. That just means that there's no more animations on the slide. Okay, and I keep losing the live chat, so I'll keep trying to go back to it. Okay, so this is a bit of a follow-up to an article I wrote now, I can't believe how many years ago, one of my Medium articles called When Better UX Research Questions Are Still Bad. So you can definitely find that Medium article, but I'm treating this as the new and improved version. So that's where this came from. So a good research process goes well beyond, let's call some customers and ask them questions, or let's talk to a few customers each week just for a few minutes. You could call this research, but a qualified researcher would probably say, that wasn't good research. Some people think research is just the interview itself, but if you want to do even that part well, then you've got to look at talking to people as just the start of it. It's really that iceberg type of thing, because this is what a research process looks like. And even though we've got books that tell us, hey, just go out and talk to customers, go out the door, talk to people, they're usually not written by researchers. That's the weirdest thing. Kagan, Torres, Spool, Godhealth, Lean Startup, not written by researchers, but telling you how to do research. So obviously there's a bit of a collision there. So that means a lot of people, even sometimes qualified researchers don't always ask the best questions, which also means that AI has been training on a lot of bad questions, which means if you have AI write your questions, you sometimes get really bad questions. So this is what a great research process looks like. And we also talked about that on episode 248. We talked about insights and actionable suggestions and how important that step of the research process is as well. So for today's episode, I wish I could tell you all about the whole research process, but we're just going to focus on better questions, which means that that's what we're working on when we're planning our research, and those are the questions and spontaneous follow-up questions that we will come up with while we are conducting the sessions. So first, let's talk about the zillion different types of bad questions that I have found. So we've got slides for each type of bad questions, and get ready, there's like 25 slides here, so we're going to talk about a lot. But first of all, why should we care, right? We just want to talk to customers. We just want to ask them if they like stuff, or as Ana Lucia said, would you use this? Or, hey, I just want to validate my idea. Well, remember that bad questions can lead to bad answers. Bad answers can lead to bad data. Bad data can lead to strategies, priorities, decisions, products, services, features, designs, touch point, and more that aren't good. They are bad. They are failing. We have such high failure rates right now, and really a root cause is very often our lack of research data or the bad research data that told us, yeah, sure, go in that direction. So let's break that cycle. So the first type of question I want to talk about is what we call double barrel, stacked, or a compound question. This asks more than one question at a time, like, what do you do before and after work? What do you think about our checkout and our return policy? What do you like and not like about this idea? So again, these are questions that ask two questions in. Oh, is there something in the middle of the screen? I was going nuts trying to clean my monitor. Same for me. I don't know what's in the middle of the screen, and I don't know why, so I'm not going to be able to fix it right now, but you're right, there is a dot in the middle of the screen, and I couldn't find it, and I'll have to fix it another time. Sorry, everybody. So what's the solution for these? Just split them into multiple questions. You don't have to ask everything all at once. What do you do before work? The person answers. What do you do after work? It's that easy. Next type of bad question would be a closed or sometimes a binary question, where you're essentially asking someone a yes/no question. Excuse me, like, do you use Excel for this step of your process? Well, technically the answer is yes or no. Oop, my stuff is coming up out of order. So what's the solution? Use open questions instead of closed questions. Instead of saying, do you use Excel for this step, ask, which tools, if any, do you use for this step of the process? Another solution is that a closed question can be okay if you follow it up by a question digging for details, because you might say, do you use Excel for this step of the process? And they go, yeah. And then you might ask a follow-up question about what they use instead if they say no, or you might ask a question about how they use it, or does that work, where does that work well for them, or how could it be improved? So don't assume that do you use Excel or these kinds of closed yes/no questions are the right way to go. Very often they're not. Okay, next. So understand and fix your own problem. These are very common, especially from non-researchers, where we're asking participants questions that imply that they completely understand their own problems and they can fix them, like, what is our system missing? As if someone has an idea of what the full set of your system could be and they know exactly what's missing. They might be able to guess something, but that's usually not how we would ask that question. What do you need? a lot of people don't really know what they need. They might know what's going wrong, or they might know they can't get something done, but they might not know how to solve that or what's missing. Let's keep going. How should we change this? Well, we can ask that for fun if we're curious, but people don't really know. They're not always great at coming up with those solutions. So remember, the solution here is it's your job to understand their problems. Don't just ask them, hey, what's your problem here? The worst one is, what are your pain points here? Nobody says pain points except tech workers. And so be careful about trying to ask people questions that imply that they understand their own problems and they know what to do with your system. Ana Lucia says, I would say it's also okay to use a closed question when you're returning a question if you didn't understand what people said. Did you say you use Excel? Yes, certainly for a clarification, it can be okay to clarify, but we don't want to box people into particular answers where we don't have to. That's really the point of the closed question. You will know what your system is missing or what people need if you ask the right questions, listen to what's being said and not said, and observe them working on their tasks. That's it. It's really about observing. So next, we've got, I don't know. Asks participants questions that they are unlikely to know the answers to, like, which paid features do you use on other sites? Sometimes they're not the person who pays the bills, or they don't have a sense of which features were free or paid or extra packages. They just might not know. They might be the wrong person to ask that question. Let's see, I've got another example. How many people at your company use Excel for this? They have no idea. They would have no idea unless it's their job to know, unless you are asking the data analyst or the IT person who can look that up in their records. Don't ask anybody else questions where they are unlikely to know the answer. If you see yourself writing questions like these, challenge yourself, write better questions. And that's why having a research plan, well, it's one of many reasons why having a research plan is so important, because it gives you the opportunity to take a second look at your questions and go, okay, rephrase. So the best way to go is to avoid these questions. Unless you're talking to the person who knows, don't assume that anybody is going to know these things or is going to go find them out for you. Consider what you're trying to learn and ask different questions, or ask a different person. Yeah, or the person paying for the license keys. Yeah, make sure you're not asking someone something they won't know, whether that knowledge is random or too in-depth or what other people do. So be careful with these I don't know questions. Okay, next, these are some of the worst, yet they are so common, especially from non-UX people. Future prediction questions. They ask the participant to guess what they might do in the future. For example, what would you pay for something like this idea? Where would you install a medical device like the one I'm describing? How much would you pay for a solution like this? How would you use the reporting section? These questions can be especially difficult when the participant can't try the real thing. When we ask them about early concepts or storyboards or just really early ideas, it's hard for them to know what they may or may not do in the future, especially if they're not the decision maker or the person who pays. We might ask them about something that doesn't exist yet or something we haven't built yet. So people might just imagine something. They'll imagine the best execution of the best idea, and they'll go, oh yeah, I'd use that a lot. But you have no idea what they are imagining, and you have no idea what they would pay for it, because they probably expect it for free. So what's the solution? Learn more about how they do this now, because they might continue doing something similar in the future. What does this cost you now? If they know, they can tell you. Maybe they don't know, you find out you have to talk to someone else. How would you rate the value of the service given what you're paying? So this would give you a better sense of what is valuable to someone versus what's the exact number value you would assign to this idea I'm trying to describe to you. Ana Lucia says, I hate the payment questions. I'd rather have marketing take care of that. Yes, these typically would be marketing questions. Sometimes we in CX and UX get stuck asking them, but usually I refuse, because especially if it's still a concept or just something I'm describing, we have no idea what somebody would pay for the thing they can't see or try. Another thing to remember is, let's get back to my slide. Who in your organization compares and selects services like these? Then interview that person. So just remember, you might be talking to the wrong person based on that future prediction question, but notice that a lot of these future prediction questions tend to be for sales and marketing. They're usually not great questions, even though product managers love to ask them because they think then they can do strategic pricing work. It's tough. You're asking someone to guess at something that might be unguessable. Asking about others is another common mistake. All of these are common mistakes, but we hear this one a lot, which is where you ask the participant questions about what others might do or might not do, and the participant rarely knows or can predict that. Like, would your colleagues like something like this? How often would your friends send you messages in this system? How much would your manager pay for this? Just avoid these questions. Asking the participant to predict their own actions or behaviors is already not a good practice. Asking them to predict other people's behaviors is even, further out there. People just don't know, and you could end up with really bad data where they're guessing, and then you make decisions based on it, and you go, but they said their colleagues would use it. Hey, if you want to know if their colleagues would use it, talk to their colleagues. Be careful of high cognitive load questions. These are questions that are so long that it's easy to forget what the question even is. As a joke, I asked Claude AI to come up with a sample question that was hilariously long. Claude came up with something so long, I had to edit it down. This is the shorter version, but we can imagine someone asking a question almost like this. After having engaged with both the free and premium features of our application during this session, and taking into consideration your stated budget constraints, common tasks, and long-term goals for an app like ours, how might your willingness to convert from a free user to a paying subscriber be influenced by promotions, discounts, or feature bundling strategies that our company might explore? I spelled "our" wrong, but you get the point. You end up having a question, no matter what the topic is, that is so long that people are like, what am I answering again? Yeah, Ana Lucia says you lost me. That was the point. I have been asked some of these you lost me questions in where I'm the participant and there's a product manager interviewing me. So we have to be careful about writing questions that are just too long. Write the shortest question you can. Ask questions the shortest way possible. And a nice accessibility thing you can do is take your questions, especially if you're on a video call, and paste them into the chat. That way, especially with a longer question, people can see it, they can think about it, and they don't have to say, well, what did that person say? So consider asking the shortest question you can. Ancient memory questions, when we ask participants to remember details of tasks from long ago. Thinking about when you signed up with us 2 years ago, which aspects of that process were difficult? That is just too long ago and far away. Even if they say, yeah, I remember signing up for your service, they probably don't remember some of the fine details that we really want to know about if there's something about that we're trying to understand or improve. So remember, the best way to go is to find people who are just now signing up with our system, for example, and observe them doing these tasks versus asking them to remember how they did them. Even something someone did yesterday might be a distant memory if they don't have a good memory or it wasn't particularly memorable. So remember that observational research is going to be the best way to go. An interview question might not make a lot of sense here. The next type of bad question that I want to talk about is invoking authority. This is when you frame a question as though it's coming from an authority figure. Our CEO wants to know if you are likely to use reporting every month. The sales team is curious if you plan to renew your contract next year. Avoid these questions. Ask what you need to know without adding implied pressure from leaders or executives. Or don't ask these questions at all, or you reword them to the core of what you mean without invoking the authority figure. Ana Lucia says, did you use diapers? How were your reactions to cotton diapers? Yes, that was for me certainly long ago. For some people, maybe more recent, but for me, a very long time ago. False dichotomy is something that I just can't stand, not only in research, but especially in people fighting with you on LinkedIn or posting things to social media. You see so many false choices and false dichotomies, and that's when you are offered fewer choices than there really are. Like if someone says, would you rather have 10 minutes of research with 5 participants or 20 minutes of research with 2 participants? Who made this up? This is a false choice. So, and if, for example, would you prefer a green button or a blue button? Maybe it's neither, but we've only asked these 2 and they'll feel like they have to pick one of them when they probably don't. True or false, I always download a PDF after completing the process. Those might not be the only options, and there might be variations in their process. Which feature should we build first, profile management or better search? Maybe neither of them. If you write a question and you realize you're backing someone into a false choice of this or that or 3 thises or that's, stop and avoid these questions. Consider why you're asking them. Ask what you really want to know, but don't nudge people into a limited choice. Use more open questions. For example, if this could come in any color, which would you prefer? That may or may not be great data, but it's a better question than do you want the green one or the blue one? You might ask, once the process is complete, which actions do you tend to take? So that's a nice open question versus after the process is complete, do you do this or this? That's a false choice. So be careful about those. Am I still on? My system for some reason is saying, oh, okay, there we go. We're back. All right, next. And let me know if you have any questions as we go. I'm kind of blowing through these, but I know people can always go back and watch the video on the dcx Hive YouTube channel. Hypotheticals. Asks participants to imagine scenarios that aren't true or may not be relevant to them. I just saw this in a project that I did, so I give you all the eye rolling I can possibly give you. I recognize that you've never had to return an item to us, but if you did, what would you think of this return process? It's fine. I guess it's okay. I have no frame of reference. I've never returned an item. I have nothing to compare this to. If everything in our product disappeared except 2 features, which would you keep? That's not going to happen. That shouldn't happen. Why are we asking that? What do we really want to know? Avoid these questions and consider what you are really trying to learn. Don't ask people about situations that aren't relevant to them. It wouldn't make sense to say to someone like, okay, I'm a woman. It wouldn't make sense to say, well, if you were a man, would you go and get checked for testicular cancer? I guess so, but I'm not a man, so why are you asking me this? And make sure you're asking what you really want to know. Yes, you're on. You blipped for a second. Okay, thanks. So yeah, be careful of those hypotheticals. If you were, I always think of the Saturday Night Live sketch where the guy says, if you were a gay bee, would you love me? And that's probably not what he really wanted to ask. Okay, let's talk about frequency questions. I see these a lot. Sure, sometimes they're on surveys, but sometimes they're in interviews. And I think we need to think more than once, about whether or not we want to ask a question about how often someone does something, or how often something happens. Like, how often do you buy groceries online? How often do you need to contact our customer support? I think my question here is this really important? Is the frequency important? Do we care about how often they're buying groceries online? Does it matter? Don't we have to make a great grocery buying experience, whether they do it once a month, once a year, or once a day? So be careful. Unless this is a make or break piece of information that will really change something in our strategies, priorities, or decisions, you probably don't need to know frequency. It's got to be great no matter what. And Larry Marine would also remind us that the less often someone does something, the better it has to be, since they might forget what to do between uses. It's got to be easy, intuitive, and logical, and not require relearning each time. So remember that a lot of these frequency questions are sometimes better on our screener surveys. We might want to only talk to people who buy groceries at least once a month. Okay, it's not a great interview question, but it might be a good screener survey question for the recruiting part of our process, which is what my patent is about. So go check out my patent, top of screen. So if your study only wants to meet the people who do this every day or rarely do this or whatever, then we want that frequency in the screener survey so that we can weed people in or out. So again, consider some questions. Hey Daryl, wouldn't a frequent user's perspective carry more weight? Not necessarily. It can sometimes be the opposite. And great question. Thank you for asking that. What happens is sometimes a frequent user is more savvy. They're used to your shitty system, and so they've got workarounds and band-aids and extra things that they do because they know how to get through it. That doesn't necessarily mean that their perspective carries more weight. It just means that they are more familiar with something and probably have developed some coping strategies. And so if you care about a frequent user's perspective versus an infrequent user's perspective, I'm all for that. But I would be determining that in the screener survey. And that way, as I see the screener survey answers come in, I can say, oh, we want to interview Daryl and Ana Lucia because they are frequent users and they're going to have that power user or that type of perspective. And let's talk to Diana and Debbie. They came through the screener survey as less frequent users. We want to get their perspectives too. So it's not that this question should never be asked anywhere, but I would challenge people to not ask it during an interview and to possibly collect that information in the screener survey so that that can be part of our criteria for who we choose to include in the study. Ana Lucia says, the frequency may even be a criterion for a behavioral typology. Right, once we're thinking about some of the demographics we want or the roles we want or typologies or personas, the frequency sometimes fits in there, and that's why it might be a better question for the screener survey versus something I ask people in an interview. If it is important to find some, for example, frequent or savvy users versus some infrequent or less savvy users, I don't want to be surprised when I'm interviewing them which bucket they fall into. I would want to make sure I'm recruiting for that earlier. I hope that makes sense. There you go. Great question. Okay, next question. Next type of bad question, feelings. A lot of the things we're talking to people about aren't emotional matters. So to ask, how do you feel about using Excel for this step of your process? How do you feel when the button doesn't work? Would you say that this step is frustrating or angering, which also sounds leading and maybe even a false choice? But consider why we're asking about feelings. The feelings may or may not be important because no matter how somebody feels, we still have to understand their problems and how to improve them. Whether they feel happy, sad, angry, furious, mellow, I give up, doesn't matter. It usually doesn't matter. So sometimes people think that for a customer journey map, I really need to know their feelings so that I can map these smiley faces on my customer journey map. I don't do it because it's not actionable. As a researcher, designer, strategist, the feelings are less important to me. I need to understand the tasks. I need to make something better, whether they're frustrated, angry, tired, happy, whatever. It just, in many cases, it doesn't matter. Ana Lucia says, yesterday I was talking to a friend about journey maps and how the feelings part is so useless. How will that help us? And wasn't it pretty much guessed? And even if we ask people how they feel, they're trying to come up with a word in the moment for very often what they're thinking. They're usually not necessarily going through an emotion about something. And so they might associate a word with what they're thinking, like, wow, this is really hard to use, or this is really frustrating. Okay, but that's trying to apply an emotion to a thought. Daryl says some people hate Excel even when it's an appropriate solution. Sure, there might be some best practices or good solutions or things that our company's going to build, and maybe how people feel don't matter. That doesn't mean that I'm an uncaring, no empathy person. It just means that I don't journey map feelings and I don't ask people about feelings, because I know that if I focus on their task, let's go back to my slide. If I focus on their task and I make it great, the emotions will be positive. If I make somebody's task or experience crappy, emotions will be negative. That's it. So I don't have to map emotions. So I don't do empathy maps with emotions. I don't do customer journey maps with emotions. I know that people will feel positive emotions if we make a good system that meets or exceeds their expectations, and they will have negative emotions if we don't do that. So remember, another thing to keep in mind here, if you are discussing difficult, charged feelings, traumas, make sure that is being done by a qualified psychologist or a qualified person. Please do not send out your engineer or your business analyst or your marketer or your product manager who isn't a qualified psychologist to ask people about trauma. I've seen this especially in internships, practice projects, and some of these people who volunteer for nonprofits. They've never done interviews before because they're fresh out of a boot camp, and now they have to ask people about having been attacked or having been the victims of racism. And it's like, whoa, I think that should not be handled, possibly not even by me. I am not a qualified psychologist. So please be careful if you are moving into topics that relate to feelings and emotions based in trauma or PTSD or bad childhood stuff, etc. Please don't send somebody out to have conversations with people, and especially non-adults like children and minors and adolescents. So please, just don't. Okay, let's also not ask anybody any questions that appear to shame or judge them. For example, given that error message, it looks like you're not doing this right. Do you know where you went wrong? Most of our customers do this differently. Why did you choose to do it this way? Last year's survey said you would use a feature like this, but our system shows that you haven't used it yet. Why not? How often should someone like you back up your data? Our data shows that college grads tend to do this, but you just did the opposite. I guess you never went to college. So just avoid these questions. Consider what you're trying to learn. Ask open questions and make sure you're not asking any questions that can make people feel ashamed, judged, like they've done something wrong, like something about them is incomplete. Ana Lucia says that third question is a bit disturbing, a bit stalkerish. Yeah, these are made up ones. Most of the questions you're seeing, I either made up for the purposes of these slides, or I've had clients suggest that they be asked. In this case, I just made these up. But I've heard questions like these, especially the first two, where people feel like, oh, you got an error message. I guess you didn't do something right. What do you think you did wrong? And they think that's really friendly and open, and it's not. Another judgment one that isn't on the slide that I want to talk about quickly, especially because my nose is itchy, is I once saw somebody post to social media that said, oh, if you see someone touching the back of their neck a lot, it means they're uncomfortable and you should ask them why they're uncomfortable. And I thought that can make somebody feel really ashamed that they've been noticed touching their neck or judged or overly scrutinized. Now I would have a sense of how closely this person is watching me, because they're saying, hey, you just touched the back of your neck there. I think that means you're uncomfortable. Why are you uncomfortable? Yeah, Ana Lucia says you may be itchy. The last time we talked about that question on my show some years ago, I said, I used to have a really bad rash behind my ear, and I had it for about 20 years. So very often, even if you watch old videos on the channel, you'll very often see me do this. That is not a secret message. That is not a sign of discomfort. That is not a sign that I'm experiencing an emotion and you should probe deeper. It's really just a sign that I had an out of control rash. So I would say, please be careful of things that you might say that could make people feel shame or judged or overly scrutinized. Another type of bad question is when we use jargon, and I see this one a lot. We assume that people speak our language, and so we ask them stuff that's really a lot of inside tech terms. We might say, do you find our features to be well integrated? That's actually a common question from some of the customer satisfaction scores. Do you like the autosave feature? I wasn't thinking about a feature and I wasn't going to call it autosave. How would you use our smart publishing module? Would you rather use API calls or microservices for this? That could be fine if you're talking to a techie person, but if not, not good. So the solution is speak their language. Even if it's not what your company calls this particular thing, use what the user would call it. That's part of good information architecture. And sometimes you have to learn what they call it. That can sometimes be a great question. What do you call this particular thing here? Remember that people don't usually use our lingo. They might not say user experience. Lots of people have heard of user friendly, but they might not know user experience or design. These things are internal tech company lingo things. You could just simply call it a function or a capability. People have no idea what was integrated with what or when that's been done well. So, and in fact, a great integration would be so seamless that nobody would even think about it. So remember to use words that a user would normally say. Ana Lucia says, oh, I remember the questions Claude suggested when you did that show about using AI as a UX researcher. They were filled with UX and tech jargon. Yeah, I forgot what episode number that was. It was a few back from this one. It was in the year 2025, so probably episode 250 something. But yeah, we had Claude pretend to be a UX researcher, and it had a lot of questions full of jargon. And it works if you know that your audience is tech savvy, but as Daryl was saying before, we might be interviewing frequent users and infrequent users who might not know the lingo or might just call things something else. All right, back to my slides. Ooh. Okay. Don't ask people questions that ask them to review or explain the page. I see this a lot from both researchers, designers, and product managers usually. They will often show you something, and before they ask a question, they will say, take some time to take a look at this page and become more familiar with it before I give you a task to do. Or take a look at this page and tell me, what do you notice about it? Or before I have you try this, take a look around, become familiar with our product. That's not what people really do. When you first get to a page, you're just trying to do your task and you're looking for the information, button, picture, link, whatever it is that's going to help you do your task. You don't go, oh, now that I've arrived on this page, let me take a good look at everything on this page and really become familiar with this product. So we don't want to ask people to do things that are unnatural for their habits or that kind of prime them to now be more familiar with something than they should be, because we really want to catch them the first time they're seeing this, even before they've really thought about it. So we don't want to ask them, explain what you see on this page, because then they think they have to start over noticing things and explaining it to us like it's a test, and they'll start seeing and noticing things that sometimes, especially in a testing type of study, they don't see it all. They don't notice it. They totally miss it. And it's so important for us to see that, because that's data also. I've seen people say, take a look at the left column with all of these choices. Which choice would you pick? Maybe none of them. Maybe they were going to ignore the left column. Maybe they didn't even know they were choices. Maybe they didn't know they were key actions. So the solution here is just let people do the task. When the page comes up, say, this is the task you're going to do. Go, do the task. Don't ask people to take time getting to know it, because this isn't realistic. You want to observe the task as naturally as possible, and that means no time spent first on understanding or explaining the interface. Don't have them explain it to you. Don't you explain it to them. Just let them use it and see what they do. Oh, I've just messed up all my windows, and okay, I thought I messed up my windows, but I'm still here. Oh, my makeup's gone funky. I wasn't looking. And I'm blipping. Okay, sorry. I'm hopefully back. Hopefully I'm back. Let's go back to my slides. Okay. Just curious asks participants questions that aren't relevant to research goals because someone is curious. How long have you been married? When your products, services, and experiences or research are unrelated to human relationships. What's your household income? When that doesn't matter, and if it's important, we could ask that. We can ask these on the screen or survey if they're important for certain demographics, but you don't want to ask these in an interview because it can make people feel judged and like you're asking something too personal. So avoid these questions, period. Again, if you only want to talk to married people for your study, find that out during your screen or survey. Don't ask that during the interview. Offensive and invasive asks participants irrelevant questions that are offensive or invasive. So going one step further from our previous slide, why didn't you ever have children? Especially if your product, services, and experiences or your research are unrelated to children or having them. Do you think other Black people like you would feel the same way? Yes, I invented these fake questions to be absolutely ridiculous and offensive. I would never ask this, you should never ask this, but I can imagine the person who would ask this. So we're just going to say this out loud and say it's offensive and invasive so that we remember to never do this. Our research shows that Christians really like this feature. Are you Christian? Are you gay? You seem to have trouble answering my questions. Do you have learning or other disabilities? You mentioned that you have ADHD. Do you think others with ADHD would also like this? Avoid these questions, period. These are just completely bad and offensive. I could see a poorly trained person trying things like this or an inexperienced person trying things like this, but these are just 1000% wrong. Ana Lucia says, I usually participate in a lot of surveys. I don't know why they always ask questions about being married, having children, income, or whatever. Is that needed for everything? It's because a lot of companies still rely on demographics, and we've previously done a show on demographics, so you can just go to YouTube and write dcx demographics. It'll come up, and that will explain some of that. So let's talk about a type of bad question that we haven't even covered yet, and it's so common that it's got its own chapter, and that is leading questions. Sorry that my nose is itchy. I put on makeup and now my nose is itchy. Leading questions, so common, especially when people are still learning research, but even sometimes from experienced researchers. It's just an easy hole to fall into. Leading questions are questions that imply the answer or nudge a participant toward a particular answer. Would you agree that this is easy to use? That sounds like a friendly question, and I said it in a friendly way, but unfortunately we are trying to nudge people to say, yes, this is easy to use. Or we might say, how easy is this to use? Now we're getting people thinking about ease and easiness, and they probably want to make us happy and be polite, and still say, oh yeah, this was pretty easy to use. I've seen people ask that question after the participant tried something, got every single thing wrong you could possibly get wrong, and then declared it very easy to use. Doesn't matter, you got everything wrong. Most of our customers like these features. What do you think of them? Again, this is a leading question. I'm trying to get people to follow the herd. I'm not giving them the chance to have their own perspective. Would you rate this experience unsatisfactory, slightly satisfactory, mostly satisfactory, or excellent? These are choices that only one of them is negative and the rest are positive. And so we're really trying to make our data look like people mostly like this thing. So that is a leading question. After our interview, will you rate our app 5 stars in the App Store? That's weird and invasive and also rather leading. So again, avoid these questions. I also, let's see if there's any comments that I missed. Is this feed coming from YouTube? I don't know how to answer that because I use Restream and it streams to Twitch, YouTube, and LinkedIn at the same time. I always recommend that people join us on Twitch for the best experience. YouTube is the second best experience. So follow us at dcx Hive, like hive of bees. That's our new channel. Ana Lucia says, is it say something like poor married people with 10 kids don't want to pay for our app? You'd have to go see my demographics show, and we don't really know. Another type of leading question, in my opinion, is trying to kind of reconfirm something somebody already told you in a survey or previous research or data you already have. For example, our survey said you use this every day. Is that still true? We can ask it without asking it like that, because when we start with, hey, this is what you said before, are you lying to us? It can be a bit awkward. Our records show that you logged in yesterday. When did you last log in? Well, evidently yesterday. But if our records show this, we don't have to ask about it. We have good data, and that data might be better than someone's memory. We asked your age on our survey. Can you please confirm that you are 52 years old? We asked this already. So if you need to ask these questions, you would pretend that you don't already know. Like, when is the last time you logged into our system? Without telling them it's yesterday. And maybe if they get that wrong, they don't love you as much as you think. Or you might have to say, if you don't mind me asking, what is your age? Now, we would only ask that if we don't know and we needed to know. And in general, we don't need to know people's age. It's always something that we could ask in the screener survey if that's important, or we only want to meet people of a certain age. Now, I've talked about this one many times in the past. This is another form of leading question, since we're trying to get people to tell us something that we want to hear. And I like to call these the cat's urinary tract. And this is a phrase I coined from an early 1990s American TV commercial where, and this is an actual screen grab from it, a man with a cat looks at the camera and says, "Is a cat's urinary tract health important?" And as you can see on the screen, it says very important. There is only one answer to that. There is no friendly, humane, cat-liking person who would say that there is some aspect of a cat's health that is not important. So these are the types of questions that seem to only have one answer. For example, if you liked our app, would you recommend it to others? Maybe. Probably. Yeah. No? Who's going to say no to that? That's when I write questions and I say, what could someone possibly say here? Well, then this is a crappy question. Would you prefer an app that loads quickly? No. Who's gonna say no? This is cat's urinary tract. There is only one answer here. Yes, I want an app that loads quickly. Is it important to have clear status updates as you move through the process? Who's going to say no? No, I do not want clear status updates as I move through the process. And the problem is very often these questions are asked to validate an idea or something somebody wants to do or build. So we want to say, see, everybody said they want clear status updates, so we should be building clear status updates. Okay, maybe, but that's a bad question. How can you use favorites? To mark something as one of my favorites? How many different ways? So sometimes there could be a good reason to ask this, but very often there is not. Am I still broadcasting? Am I live? Yes. Okay, so sorry if there are any blips today. Why would you need to use undo? To undo the last thing I did? Cat's urinary tract. So avoid these questions. Imagine what types of answers you might get from a question like this. If there's really only one answer, avoid the question and find some other way to ask what you really want to know. Avoid leading questions where the answer is in the question. I've seen questions that imply or give away the answer, and I most often see these during evaluative research or usability testing. Am I still on? Hello, anybody? I've stopped seeing comments, so I'm hoping I'm still broadcasting. Who knows? So, for example, where would you search for products? Well, you've just told them that they should probably do a search and that it should probably be for products. So the answer is kind of in the question. If your next step is to submit the form, how would you do that when there is a big submit button at the end of the form? So obviously you've just given them a clue that you expect them to submit the form and they're looking for something that says submit. So the solution is more open questions. What would you do next? So now I've got an audience participation. Oh good, I'm live. Hi everybody, I'm a lurker today. That's fine. Hi Roman. So now it's audience participation time. We're going to have a little fun. Before we talk about good questions, let's see if you can recognize what's wrong with these common questions. Which rules am I breaking if I ask the question, how excited are you about our new AI features? And hint, we might be breaking more than one rule. And again, you don't have to remember the exact name I gave of the rule. You're welcome to just describe in general why this might be a bad research question. Do they even know what are the AI features? Yes, great question. Maybe they can't. It's like that example of what's integrated and what's not integrated. They might not know what the AI features even are. It implies that I'm excited at all. That's right. It's a leading question and a bit of an emotional question that implies that you must be excited about these, and we're really hoping to hear you're excited about them. So please tell us what we want to hear. Yep, it's a leading question. And also we've got some of that lingo in there when we say AI features. Maybe something was automated or happened for the user, but they might not know it's an AI feature. Okay, next audience participation 1. How often would you use a dashboard with these 3 metrics? What rules are we breaking here? I've got a bunch of these. I hope you don't mind playing along, but I want to make sure today's lesson is really sinking in. How often would you use a dashboard with these 3 metrics? How often questions are a no-no? Right, does it matter how often they use the dashboard? It's got to be a good dashboard whether they look at it once a week, once a month, or once a decade. Also, we're kind of prescribing the solution. We're saying the dashboard has to have these 3 metrics. Yeah, Ana Lucia says, where did the metrics come from? Maybe these aren't the right metrics. Maybe they do want a dashboard, and they do want a dashboard with metrics, but maybe these 3 aren't the right ones, and we didn't ask an open enough question to learn What do they hope the dashboard will be, do, show? What actions do they need to take from a dashboard? Next one. We're thinking about launching spell check before we work on better search. Which would you need first? Why might that not be a great question? Ana Lucia says they didn't do task analysis. They have no idea what people need. Yeah, even without task analysis, do we already know if users need spell check or a better search? What do we already know about this? Why are we asking the users this? Do we already know? And is there another feature or improvement or something that they might need even more? Sometimes we are filling a product with features because someone said launch stuff, and maybe it turns out before the spell check and before the better search, something is on fire even more. And so asking people which they would need first between A or B is also that false dichotomy. It is a false choice where you can only pick one of these two. And of course, Ana Lucia says we might not even be clear on what problem we're trying to fix. How would you feel if we only integrated Calendly? What's wrong with that question? How would you feel if we only integrated Calendly and we didn't integrate your Google Calendar or your Outlook Calendar or some other calendar system? How would you feel? Feelings question, not actionable. Yeah, when people mention Calendly to me, I don't have a lot of feelings. I don't find Calendly to be an emotional issue for me. So asking me how I feel if I only integrated Calendly is probably not the right question. A better question might be, which calendar system do you use? Or which calendar system or systems should our tool plug into? Feelings don't give us enough information. That's right. And they probably don't even matter. I've got a few more. The VP of product is curious about who agrees that we should have a helpful chatbot. I packed that one with a lot of crap, so feel free. Yeah, someone might not even know what Calendly is. Another good point from the last one. Leading. Yeah, leading in many ways. So we've got our authority figure, the VP of product. So remember we talked earlier about invoking authority. So leave that out. Who agrees? We're priming you that you probably should agree with us. We're looking for people who agree. So that is leading you to tell us what we want to hear. And we've described the chatbot as helpful. So we've put the answer in the question. We're telling you it's a helpful chatbot. It ends up a bit cat's urinary tract because you end up thinking, oh, well, sure, of course I would want a helpful chatbot. Who doesn't want a helpful chatbot? Cat's urinary tract. Hello, Alia. Yeah, the question's funny. Yeah, I made up these fake questions as examples of bad questions, but we've all seen and heard questions like these. So they're fake, but they're all too real. Got a couple more. How do our notifications help you stay productive? I know Amy's going to be on this one. What's wrong with asking that question during a research interview or observation? I know that YouTube and LinkedIn are delayed. Twitch is not delayed, which is why Ana Lucia is beating many of you to the answer. So they may or may not call something a notification. That might not be jargon. People might know what that is, but maybe they don't. Why are they assuming people are productive when using the notifications? Right. The notifications might not help you at all. So the question implies the notifications help you be productive. And what will typically happen is people will invent an answer because they'll think, they want me to give a good reason why notifications would make me productive. So I need to come up with something. And there usually isn't room for the typical participant, unless you have my personality. The typical participant isn't going to go, what are you talking about? These don't help me stay productive. usually you'll come up with something. You'll say, oh, well, I'm sure it would help me be more productive to be more aware of status updates. Alia says it's imposing that notification helps with productivity. Yes. Dana says it puts work on the customer. They have to justify. Exactly. Okay, we've got a few more fake ones to practice how well you can recognize bad research questions. I've got this one and one more. You've been using our system a while. What would you say it's missing? What's wrong with that as a research question? So while you're all typing, I would say that this is from the earlier slide about how we are assuming that our users, savvy users or not savvy users, understand their problems and their tasks, understand our systems, understand what the perfect solution would look like, and understand what our system is missing that would make it the better or more perfect solution. And people generally just don't know. They might know a glaringly missing thing, like, oh my God, it's an email app and you're not checking my spelling. This is ridiculous. You should be checking my spelling. But they might not be able to come up with all of the solutions for their problems. Oops, sorry, then I'm blipping. What is being productive? Yeah, that's a good thing too. Dana reminds us it's our job to find out what's missing. The customer will invent something. That's true. And it might not even be the most important thing for the task they're trying to get done. It might be something they say just so they can give us an answer. Okay, I got one more for practice and then we'll talk about some good questions, though much fewer slides about that. What should we change that would make more of your colleagues sign up for our system? That is my last example of a bad question. Why is it a bad question? What should we change that would make more of your colleagues sign up for our system? Yeah, Amy reminds us we shouldn't ask users for solutions. We should find out their problems. Alia says researchers should figure out what's missing. The users might feel they know what they need, but that's not always the case. Yeah, everybody's doing a great job today. Thanks for playing along in our audience participation adventure. So what's wrong with what should we change that would make more of your colleagues sign up for our system? Asking questions about how others would behave. Yes, Ana Lucia's on it. That's definitely the core problem. Obviously, it's got a little bit of what is our system missing in there, and can you solve our problem for us? But one of the big problems here is what would make your colleagues sign up for our system? Who knows what other people need and prefer? That's right, go ask them. Yes, and Dana reminds us customers can barely predict their own behavior. They're not going to predict others. And that was in my earlier slides when we went through all of these types of questions. So let's do a few slides on great questions, and then I'll be over in Discord doing our Life After Tech book club if anybody wants to join me there in about 15 minutes. And as I finish these last few slides, sorry, my nose is so itchy. I must be having an allergic reaction to something. Let me know if you have any questions about questions. So what's a great question? Room for improvement. I think one of the best questions we can ask during a research study is, how could this be improved? No matter what somebody is doing, how could it be improved? It's a gentler way to ask people what they don't like. Then you have to say, what don't you like about this? And they go, I don't want to insult this person and say something I don't like. But when we talk about what could be improved, it implies that we're open to improvement. And I find that people tend to be more creative. They might imagine other solutions. And that, of course, doesn't mean that we build those solutions, because they might not be solving their problem very well or at all. But we want to get a better understanding of their needs and perspectives. Also, I like to cycle around, as I call it, and ask this again. If I say, how can this be improved? And they go, oh, yeah, sometimes it's really hard for me to fill in this information because I never have it handy. I don't go, okay, thanks, next question. I will say, what else? What else could be improved? So I call that cycling around. There's probably some better term for it, but don't always take someone's first answer as the only answer. Keep digging and find out if there's anything else that you might be missing, because sometimes questions have more than one answer. What's working well? I like to ask, what about that, if anything, works well for you? Or thinking about your daily tasks, what about this works well for you? I always try to get them thinking about themselves, because sometimes they'll say, well, I can see how other people might like something like this. And I go, well, I'm not talking to other people, I'm talking to you. What, if anything, works well for you? Maybe it's nothing. So again, I think it's a gentler way to go, and we should leave open the possibility that maybe they like nothing. It's always possible. We don't want to lead them into saying that there's something they like. Ana Lucia says, I asked that during my volunteering time. The answers were great. I had someone tell me something like, the best scenario would be to give it my grocery list and the system tells me where to get it cheaper. Yeah, sometimes people do come up with interesting ideas or solutions. Sometimes they say something that sparks our innovation and creativity, but I never expect them to have the solution to their problem, and I never expect exactly what they say to be the right solution. I just expect it to be an interesting starting point for imagination. And of course, cycle around and ask again in case there are multiple things that worked well for someone and we want to get a sense of what those are. Open questions are the winners. You know, we've talked today a lot about closed questions and false choices. So instead of saying, do you care more about this or this, we want to ask open questions like, what are some of the key factors that influence your decision? That opens it to being 1 factor, 10 factors, whatever it is. Let's hear what's important to people and what they're thinking about. How do you decide if this is trustworthy? That's a giant, open, interesting question that I like to ask sometimes, especially for startups and new systems. Instead of saying, do you trust this? People, oh yeah, sure, I trust this. Instead, I say, how do you decide if this is trustworthy? And I've had people go, you know, now that I look at this site, I don't trust these people. And I'll go, okay, how did you decide that? Oh, well, their logo is very unprofessional, or I don't see a phone number I can call, so they're probably hard to reach. And people come up with all kinds of reasons, and I'm a curious cat, and I think the open questions are much better. How do you know when you've successfully completed this process? That's so much better than saying, okay, you finished the process, now what next? No. Do they understand when they finish the process? And avoid all the bad versions of what could be an open question. Let's just check if there are any comments. So, what else? And ask people for a story. Assuming it's relatively recent and we're not asking them about something that happened a very long time ago, tell me about the last time you exported your data. Let's start with, how did you know you needed to do an export? So I'm starting with the trigger. I'm not starting in the middle of the process. I'm not starting with when you went to our system and clicked export. I'm starting before that with how you even knew that you needed your data. Then I'll eventually find my way to them being in our system and clicking export. I noticed that you grouped exporting with contacting customer support. Can you tell me more about that? So that might be like in a card sort or something like that, where you're doing it moderated and you're curious why people did something, but you don't want to act like, why'd you do that? No matter how you say, why'd you do that to someone, it always sounds really judgmental. There's pretty much no gentle way to ask that. So I like to instead say, can you tell me more about that? Or can you tell me about how you decided on that? So you just want to make sure you're asking questions that are gentle and don't accidentally or on purpose sound aggressive or judgmental. And as I said earlier, especially, wrong direction. As I said earlier, especially where you have longer questions, or if you're going to read something they're not going to see on the screen, paste it into the chat. And you can always wrap up with a very common question, the magic wand, which sounds something like, if you had a magic wand and could create your dream solution, what might that look like? Now, it does sound like we're asking people to solve their own problems. So again, we do not run and build this, but how people imagine the problem being solved can give us more clues about people, contexts, tasks, and problems. Again, we're not going to run and build exactly what they say. We haven't validated an idea if they come up with a similar idea, but we can get some clues about how they envision that solution. But again, sometimes people have terrible ideas for what their solution is, and we just have to smile and keep going. Another good wrapping up question is there anything we didn't talk about today that you'd like to mention? And with that, thank you. Thanks for attending this adventure. Don't forget my 2 recent books, Customers Know You Suck, for improving businesses, and Life After Tech, for starting to find our way out of tech, because I think many of us will need to find our way out of tech eventually. You may be done with tech, tech may be done with you. So check out my books. And of course, don't forget my patent up at the top of the screen, dcx.to/patent. The password is colloquio, lowercase COLLOQUIO. I've invented something to make research recruiting way more easier, way less error prone, way more automated, and way more balanced, with a lot of really cool automations. I hope you'll check it out, but really I hope you'll tell your companies, because they might be building AI agents, they might be using outside AI services, and you might be using research tools that should really be building in these features so that research recruiting can go so much better than it does now, especially for you teams of one. Amy says, thanks, Debbie. I learn something every time I listen to you. Thank you, Amy, for coming. Deanna says, thank you. Dana says, oh my God, thank you for this webinar. Dana, I do it almost every Tuesday. This is episode 264, and we started at 1. So yeah, come on back. In fact, let me take a look at what's coming up next. Sometimes I do slides. Sometimes we look at one of my most recent articles and we turn it into a discussion. I think that's what's coming next week. So next Tuesday, for Take Action Tuesday, we're going to be talking about my article about when people ask us to democratize UX, are we really creating a democracy? Or was it already a democracy? And if it's become something else, what happened? So we're going to be talking about democratizing and democracies from the perspective of UX, not from politics, next week. Hey, Robin. Robin says, thank you. That was awesome. Just reading Customers Know You Suck. Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wait, isn't book club now? Yes, book club is in 4 minutes. So I'm going to have to flame us out of here. I'll start my show ending music. I'm going to flame us out of here, and just remind everybody, I'll also be live tomorrow, 7 p.m. Italy time, with way less lipstick on, to take your questions. Wednesday is Ask Me Anything. Tuesday is Take Action Tuesday. Wednesday is Ask Me Anything. Come and ask your questions. And with that, I'm going to flame out of here, and I'll see you. Join our Discord, dcx.to/Discord. I'm going to be in the Hive room shortly. And we're going to do some Life After Tech book club. You don't have to have bought it. You don't have to have read it if you want to get involved. So see you there. Thanks, everybody. End show button.